on the computer, and I will find that file after I hit record.
Yeah, just make sure it'll record your, you've done it before.
No, it's recording on the computer.
Yeah. So yeah, Kristin, honestly, this will be very like, this isn't super formal, like, we're drilling you with questions. It's kind of like, we just want to talk about B2B e-commerce. And this is actually kind of exciting. This is our first time having someone from Magento on. And we've been talking about Magento a lot, but we want to make it like as unbiased as we can. Because we don't want people to come to the podcast and being like, this is just like a pitch for Magento. You know what I mean? Like Trellis is already kind of biased towards Magento, but I want to make sure that we're not like overdoing it. Like we're trying to like, my thought is like, you help people and then inevitably they find the best solutions and hopefully that's Magento.
Right.
There you go. That sounds fair.
Just buy Magento. That's the whole point of this podcast.
I'll pull it back a little bit, Isaiah. Don't be so silly.
But Kristin is pretty much the best salesperson at Magento. So I want to say pretty much because I don't want to tarnish some of the other salespeople. I know you guys have other good salespeople, but so yeah, I'll kick it off, Kristin. Then Tim will do a quick sponsor mention, and then I'll intro you, and then you can just expand on your intro, and then we'll basically just go into the topics. So, and this isn't live, so it's edited, and then we post it like in a few weeks, so it won't go live for like a little while, and we'll let you know. And I'm sure Jess will, want to promote it, so we got to speak nice about Magento. Cool. So yeah, welcome to episode 21 of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Balmer from Trellis, and I'm here with hello, Tim.
Hi, I'm Timothy Peterson. I'm the CMO of SportsBiz, and I am a strategist for Trellis, and welcome. We're very glad to have you. I'm going to quickly give a sponsor mention. I want to thank you, give a big thank you to Punch Out To Go. They're a global B2B integration company specializing in connecting commerce business platforms with e-procurement and ERP applications. Punch Out To Go's iPaaS technology seamlessly links business applications to automate the flow of purchasing data. And with their solution, you can immediately reduce integration complexities for Punch Out catalogs, electronic purchase orders, invoices, and other B2B sales order automation documents, and accelerate business results. We like that. So thank you to our sponsor. And Isaiah, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. And this is definitely an exciting episode. We've talked a lot about platforms and what companies are using to make B2B e-commerce successful. And a pretty common topic that comes up is Magento, which is now owned by Adobe. So you could almost call it Adobe Commerce at this point, but it's still Magento Commerce. And we're lucky to have Kristin Gray from Magento on the call, who is the enterprise sales executive. I believe you were the #1 sales executive in 2019. Is that correct, Kristin?
That's correct, Isaiah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we had to bring the #1 person on because, #2 is not good enough. So, and Kristin, you've been in e-commerce for a while now, going back to Demandware, which is now Salesforce. Mm-hmm. And then I think you worked at Pitney Bowes. So you've kind of been in e-commerce most of your career, I think. Can you talk a little bit about is that by accident? I think for everyone it's a little bit by accident, but
I started actually, one of my first software sales roles was in fulfillment. So I learned a lot about the distribution side of the business and retail and how that all worked. And so I ventured into, looking at new opportunities and came across Demandware. And yeah, it was by accident, but I do think the fulfillment background that I do have has helped that, that basis. And then, just the last 8 years in the space has been a lot of fun. So
yeah, I think you're so right about the fulfillment side, because it's the side that no one sees. And, even myself, I've never been in a warehouse shipping things out. I mean, we've obviously shipped things out for little reasons, but I haven't actually been in the fulfillment side of things personally. So it's a side of the business people don't think about as much as they should, because without that, you can't really do e-commerce.
Exactly. You don't think about it until your package doesn't arrive on time, and then it's really so.
Yeah, then you're frustrated, and then you get a bad review, and then no one buys from your site anymore.
Yep.
So yeah, that's a great time. I didn't even realize you had that fulfillment background. So So yeah, I kind of want to get into it, but we have a lot of topics that we want to cover. And obviously you've been in, kind of the different aspects of e-commerce from fulfillment now to the platforms. But Tim, yeah, I think you're
Sure.
up on the first question, so
Yeah,
I'll pass it over to you.
well, one of the things that's still on the mind of everybody is really how COVID has affected, is continuing to affect, e-commerce, in particular B2B e-commerce. And it's interesting that Isaiah just brought up fulfillment. Of course, that's been, a hot topic about how things get to people, how quickly they get to people, how quickly things disappear because of all the changes. So could you just kind of give some impressions about COVID and B2B e-commerce from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously every business has been impacted this year, and 2020 is going to go down as a nightmare year, as we all know. I do think that, fortunately for many of the B2B companies I've been working with, they haven't been as impacted as some, retailers, some small businesses. So I think they're in a pretty stable industry for the most part, and what I will say that's come out of all of this, and what we've seen at Magento is many of our customers, it's actually forcing them now to really look at a new digital strategy, and many of our B2B distributors, wholesalers are behind in that area. So I will say that any of the positives that we've seen from it, I think, B2B companies are realizing they have to do something, and they have to go with change, which is really forcing them to do that.
Well, just one quick follow-up on that, just for a second. I mean, one of the things I was talking with someone about who's in B2B is the advent of curbside pickup for B2B e-commerce, which is something, again, like, it's not necessarily anything people would have thought of, but because it's been so huge for B2C, have you seen that with any folks that you're working with, things like curbside pickup becoming a big deal?
Yeah, it's a great point. I personally haven't, not to say that it hasn't been seen, but the customers that I've worked with, I feel like they're so far behind that conversation still, that just having the conversation around having a digital presence. But I think that's a really good point, that is a possibility, and we may see that in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And are you seeing that, a lot of B2B companies, and I agree, I think the B2B companies are a little bit more stable because they might have 1,000 customers, and maybe some of them got hurt by coronavirus and some of them might have benefited, because some industries kind of benefited from coronavirus. Mm-hmm. So it kind of evens out for them because they're kind of behind the scenes fulfilling to everyone. So it kind of evens out for them. But are you seeing that they, in the past, some of them were just not even they would just, they might care about e-commerce, but it wasn't their most important, thing on their agenda. And now they're oh, we got to do something, and there's more urgency. Are you seeing kind of a little bit more urgency?
Yeah, I definitely think the sense of urgency is there. And I think the interest level has gone up. I think for so long, especially in distribution, they've just been so far behind, and they have an old school way of thinking about ordering, and having that personal touch with a sales rep. And I think a lot of companies through COVID, when their sales reps couldn't get out in front of their customers and place orders and do things the way they were used to doing, it's really opened their eyes to new possibilities, and how to be more efficient, and how to still grow their business in pandemics like we're seeing. So I definitely think the sense of urgency is there. I think the interest level has gone up. I still think it's going to take companies time to move on that, but at least we're seeing more and more interest grow in this area. And I'll the majority of the companies I've been speaking to over the last 4 months, I would say 80% have been in the B2B space.
Wow.
Hmm.
Wow.
Wow.
So most of your prospects in your territory are end up being B2B. So wow, that's
yeah,
pretty.
It's definitely changed. I mean, it's definitely changed since I've started at Magento, but I definitely think with the pandemic, the percentages have definitely gone in favor of B2B.
Wow, that's interesting. But that's great that we're doing this podcast and hopefully helping people with the information around that. and it's funny because we basically like started working together like right as COVID started. So basically that's all we've known is just, COVID B2B e-commerce. Are you noticing though, I think one thing that has been challenging is that there's definitely the urgency and the demand, but I think people are still very price conscious because obviously they don't want to just throw, $1 million at something and it kind of blows up and doesn't go anywhere. So is that still kind of a challenge with price points and kind of dealing with price conscious customers? And
funny that you asked that because I literally just got off a call around a very similar topic with another B2B company. After seeing pricing, they were pretty much in shock, but that's where the conversation really shifts. And we don't just talk about supplementing ordering, because I think that's where the confusion lies is like, well, we're just basically going to start handing you orders. How is this helping us grow? And I think that's where the conversation can take a whole nother level. Adobe has solutions like Marketo, email marketing, ways to focus on driving more conversion, driving up average order by showing product recommendations. And so it really shifted that conversation away from price and say, let's really take a look at your business. And yeah, you are going to be supplementing what you're already doing, but the whole goal is not just to make a better customer experience for your B2B customers, but also to improve your average order value. And that's where it kind of starts blending into that B2C experience for your B2B buyers.
Yeah, and that's funny. We're already on to the next topic. I think that's where Magento really shines is like, you guys have come a long way in the last, 2-3 years with the B2B module. Probably since you started, I think a lot of the improvements have been in B2B. And the presentation that we just did together for that prospect was, I think, really impressive. And we talked about all the like B2B specific things that you can do, that personalized things. But then the whole marketing side of things is where I think B2B companies they're really behind, like from just a culture and strategy standpoint, like just getting the most basic thing. And me and Tim are actually going to be doing an event on B2B e-commerce, and we're going to talk about some of the lessons learned, which one of them to me is just getting your product data up on your website, like getting good product data on your website up online. Like if you have 100,000 products, I guarantee you, if you improve that, you'll probably get more traffic and more SEO and more people finding you and hopefully talking to you. And then those could turn into bigger sales, or like the sales reps can still reach out, like just because they bought on the Magento site, or you could still call them up and still build a relationship. So that's where I think that they need to kind of think about like the website as this marketing engine to build traffic and leads and sales, and sales reps can still be behind the scenes, talking to people and upselling people. But, Magento has so much around that. So I'm kind of curious what you are seeing. Like you said, that conversation shifted to marketing and increasing average order value. Are there certain like common themes that you're seeing that people aren't thinking about, or you're like, hey, these are the 5 things that I would do, using Magento to kind of increase average order value, or whatever it is to increase their marketing presence?
Yeah, I mean,
for the beginner,
and it definitely varies from customer to customer, but I think if you were actually able to look at the customers that have migrated over to Magento that are in that B2B space, we have an extensive array of case studies, and on average, conversions go up 20% plus that.
Wow.
In many instances, transactions are drastically going up, average order values going up, and that's from folks that have never even had an e-commerce presence before. So I really think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think, as you mentioned, marketing, I definitely think that as consumers, everyone's always ordering. Everyone pretty much at this point has ordered something from Amazon. And in your daily life as a B2B buyer, you want that same experience. And I think a lot of the tools that Magento offers really focus on making it easier for them to place orders, like, building out a quick order list. Or the ability to save those lists and do a quarterly restock. So just that simple ordering process really can help. But then I think when you start talking about driving conversion, then you get into product recommendations. Maybe you show them items that they haven't bought before, but might be something that's relatable to them that
Yep.
you can show them, and that's where we start seeing increases in average order value and improvements in conversion. So I think it's all around, that customer segmentation, marketing, the ability to manage content, and building out a full marketing plan for the year to drive more promotions and things that you wouldn't be able to do without a commerce presence.
So what I would just add to that, I think what you're saying too is that simplifying commerce, right? I mean, this is something that we talk a great deal about at Trellis. Simplifying the process is really critical. And part two, it's kind of increasing the opportunities for people to engage, right? I mean, there's so many different things that can be done, but really those are core. Just make it easy and increase the number of ways in which a potential customer or current customer can do something. Fill in that blank, right? Find additional products, find more of the same products, find the right pricing, find a person to talk to, right? All of that stuff. So I'm just very, very happy that there are more tools that are available almost on a daily basis for B2B for B2B companies to progress, to innovate.
Absolutely. And one other thing I would add to that is there's very few platforms that are out there that service both a B2C and a B2B buyer. One of the strengths of the Magento platform
in one platform, to be clear, within one platform.
Sorry, yes, to be clear, one platform. So one of the strengths of Magento versus many of the other platforms is that it services both in that same platform. So you're not investing in two separate platforms, especially if you have a hybrid B2C, B2B model. So a lot of our B2B customers can turn on feature sets that would normally be used in a B2C type of environment. And that's what makes the platform as its own so powerful.
Yeah, and you can kind of mix, and that's where I think we've been talking a lot about this in the podcast, is like the merging and the blending of B2C and B2B are getting closer and closer together. So some things that you might want to do for B2C apply to B2B, and vice versa. So you kind of like, depending on the type of company you are, you might, mix and match different things from, B2B and B2C, and you can do that all within one platform, like you said, which is very powerful. So yeah, kind of staying on the topic of platforms, just to continue that, and because we do, I'm curious as to what you're seeing in the landscape. I mean, obviously you guys I think you were considered the only leader was you and Salesforce in the most recent B2B report. Does that kind of reflect what you're seeing in the market? Because I think at least on the Trellis side, we don't necessarily see Salesforce that often. So I'm always a little skeptical of the Gartner reports. Like, we're obviously a little bit biased to Magento, because we're Magento solution partner, but some of the other platforms we see much more frequently kind of come up. So I'm just kind of curious what you're seeing in the market and where you see kind of, the competition out there. What do you see as the kind of the strong players? Obviously Magento's one of them.
Yeah. So it really depends on the size of business. Depending upon scale, really impacts platform choice. So, in the smaller markets, in mid-market, we see BigCommerce playing a pretty strong role, just because it is a SaaS provider, which is different than Magento and being a platform as a service.
Yep.
There are limitations, obviously, when you're in a SaaS environment that you
For
don't
sure.
see in a Magento PaaS environment, but they do have a pretty good presence, and they've built out some of their own extensions around B2B functionality. So it's a great option for companies that are just getting dipping their toes in the water. But if you are, looking to scale a business, if you have a pretty strong B2B business today and you expect many of your customers to migrate over, may not be a feasible option. So It really kind of depends upon where it plays. I see cloud craze.
They're kind of a little bit more on the lower end of the market.
Yeah, they're on the lower end. I would say that we do see Salesforce, which is their cloud craze offering, a bit more, just because Salesforce is strong in CRM.
In the enterprise too.
In the enterprise side. So I mean, I occasionally see them. They play strongly when there's a pretty good Salesforce install.
Yep.
But for the most part, Magento can play in all market, or sorry, in all sizes of market.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
the
pretty
unique thing
supportive.
about, I
Yeah.
think, Magento is that you're playing all the way down towards, the bottom of the market with the Shopify and BigCommerces of the world, and then all the way up to the enterprise Salesforce cloud crazes of the world. But the problem with cloud craze, like you said, is that isn't it two platforms? I know that's where it gets a little bit kind of confusing, and I'm not an expert on this, but isn't from what I understand, you have to have like cloud craze B2B, and then you have like kind of like the Salesforce Commerce Cloud is like separate. Is that how it works, or?
Yeah. So like I said before, my background, I worked at Demandware before they were acquired by Salesforce, and Demandware and Cloud Craze are two separate platforms. So a business that has both that hybrid need for both B2B and B2C, in order to have that, if you were to go with Salesforce, you would actually have to buy two separate platforms and work through two different admin panels. Where with Magento, it's all in one place. And with one license of Magento, you get 15 unique URLs and store views. And that's actually extensible even way beyond that. We have customers that, have 60 plus store views in one license. So it really enables that multi-site international capability and the ability to, like I said before, have multiple B2B, B2C sites in one instance.
So
Yeah.
Quick question on this is sort of an odd thing, but I often ask people this when I interview folks for various topics. But is there something Magento doesn't do well or doesn't want to do? I mean, because it's weird. It's a weird thing to say, but is there an area that you just don't want to be in, like that is not something you're excited about in e-commerce?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I've had a recent conversation around this, and I think if I had to pinpoint one area that we don't want to play in, and that's CRM. Adobe as a whole is very strong in a personalized experience and providing that to customers. Magento brings that shoppable experience to Adobe, where we don't feel, and in fact, I'll say it, Adobe actually leverages Salesforce CRM for our entire business.
Sure.
Because it's best in class. And we feel like we are a best in class commerce solution. We don't want to try and compete with Salesforce and CRM. So, we have recommendations. There's a lot of great CRMs out there. That's just not an area that we feel we should be playing in.
HubSpot, I'm a big believer in HubSpot for the small mid-sized guys. They just launched some new stuff, so I think HubSpot's making some moves in the CRM market. But that makes sense. So, but with that being said, though, you guys still do have a very strong kind of like with Marketo and even Magento, there's still a pretty strong customer account capabilities and reordering capabilities. So you still have that pretty strong capability, but you don't see the need for like kind of that, like I guess with CRM you look at it as kind of like the workflow, or how would you describe that? Because I feel like you do have customer accounts in Magento and in Marketo,
Yeah, I think it's just taking it to a whole nother level of sales, sales reps being able to manage their business. If you think about a traditional B2B experience. Now,
like leads,
Magento,
like lead
exactly.
gen,
Yeah, absolutely. And in Magento, we do have like request for quote workflow. So functionality like that, where you can actually place an order, ask for a discount, and send that over to your sales rep, and your sales rep would get an email and be able to talk back to you. So there's definitely that ability to manage and talk amongst your customers if you're a sales rep in Magento, but we don't take it to the next level of that lead generation piece of CRM. So that's how I would classify it if I had to.
So I just want to clarify things because I think there's some listeners that might not understand the differences, but I think Magento's really kind of making some cutting edge improvements on the platform as a service and the PWA side of things. And I know you're not on the technical side, so it's okay if we don't want to go too deep there, but I want people to kind of like better understand this. Could you kind of like explain in layman's terms, like what's the value of the platform as a service, offering? Because I think that's also a little bit newer with Adobe, and it's becoming pretty mature now with Adobe. And I think you guys wrapped in like Adobe Sensei. So I think people get confused by like platform as a service and then SaaS, like the BigCommerce and Shopify's. It's different. It is pretty different, but what does
Yeah,
that mean
no,
for,
absolutely. Yeah, no, I can absolutely answer that. And I talk about this every day. So platform as a service for Magento was done intentionally at our core from the beginning. Magento has been an open source platform. So one of the major strengths of the platform is the flexibility, the ability for our partners to be able to create new functionality and build that out and really make a unique experience. It's very different than every Magento site looks different. So that's really the strength, and we didn't want to lose that in offering a cloud option. So what Magento has intentionally done is we really kind of manage the full infrastructure, and the only thing we're not touching is the application of the software itself. Whereas in a SaaS environment, all of that's being maintained. I guess if I had to say the major difference for customers in a PaaS environment is that we're not forcing upgrades. Customers are, they are able to take upgrades in when it makes the most sense for their business.
Yep.
Whereas in a SaaS environment, those are forced whenever those are released out.
And to be clear, I think for people that are maybe a little less technical, you have full control over the application. Like, you can do whatever you want with the application in Magento. It's hosted by Adobe, but you can kind of like take it down and customize it and, bring it into the Adobe cloud environment, whereas SaaS is like, you're just like, everything's in the SaaS and you can't like completely customize the SaaS because they control the whole thing. And I think that's where people don't quite understand that difference, because there are times where we do work with SaaS platforms. It's like, there's a point where it's like, literally we can't do that because the APIs don't exist, or we can't like customize the core software. Like, it's like, that's literally impossible. Whereas with a PaaS, it's always possible. It's just kind of like, how much time and money do you have to do it? So I always tell people, like, we can do it. If you want to pay us enough money, we can do whatever you want. So,
well, I think it might be good to segue into yet another topic that we have. It's a favorite of listeners of ours. It's really about the B2B, B2C, division or lack of division, how things are. And one of the things that is just an observation that I've had and others have had is that things are still feel like they're further ahead on the B2B side as far as the customer experience, as far as what the end consumer is able to do, or how, a live chat, for example, that is more common in B2C than it is in B2B. I mean, even things of that sort. So really, what are you seeing, or what are you thinking about, that progression is, now that so many people are really spending money on B2B, is B2B going to get ahead of B2C, and then all of a sudden ideas are going to flow in the other direction? Or what do you see about this?
Yeah, I don't know if it would ever get ahead. I think that's
fair. That's completely fair.
I think that B2B can learn a lot from B2C retailers. They've really kind of mastered the commerce experience. As you know, everyone's trying to replicate the Amazon experience. So, anything that we can do to make it easier, quicker, faster, for a customer to order, especially in the B2B space, to make their day easier, is going to be key. And a lot of that has already been really figured out in that B2C Amazon experience. So, like I said, I don't know if there's anything that we can take away and say, like, yeah, it's gonna move ahead. I definitely think it's making progress, and I think platforms like Magento enable that because it's doing both sides of the business in one platform. So you can leverage everything that a B2C retailer is doing with Magento. So I think they will remain, they will both progress. I don't ever see B2B surpassing that of B2C.
Well,
at least that's my perspective.
Well, no, and you could be absolutely right. I think we're all going to be living this and trying to see what happens as time goes by. But one of the things you said about Amazon also is, rings true for me. We're always talking about Amazon, right? I mean, how could you not talk about $1 trillion, value business? I mean,
Yeah, it's insane.
It's just extraordinary, right? But one of the things that's fascinating to me is how often they test things out. I mean, I'm just amazed. So I got some messages not too long ago that were recommendations, like, and the classic product recommendation thing. It's like, you bought this, so you want to buy this, and or here is your history, so here's something related to that. Well, the message I was getting was like, well, you bought this shampoo or this detergent or, whatever I bought over from Amazon. Did you know that we now make that? And here's an option. Or did you know that we now offer this in different flavors or formats or scents or whatever? And it's really getting much, much, much more elaborate. I mean, I was really impressed by this. And I'm thinking, well, great. This isn't great just for B2C. It's really great for anybody. Because, you can buy, I always use the example of like pipes and LED lighting and, these things that you can't necessarily wrap your mind around them as, these distinct categories of things that have names and flavors, right? But they do, there are updates all the time and upgrades to materials and options. And the Amazon way of doing things is just, brilliant. If I were buying a particular kind of pipe, for my business, I'd want to know what the new options are and get that sent to me in a really
the newest technology or the newest kind of upgrade. And yeah, I totally agree. I actually, one of our guests that's coming up later on in a few weeks is a Magento. Well, she had worked for a distributor for 15 years. She's now at actually Punch Out To Go, our sponsor. So that's kind of exciting. But they're on Magento. They've went through many journeys and they're on Magento too. And they've got a pretty sophisticated, for like you said, for B2B, a lot of people are way behind, but I was pretty impressed by their site. And it's not Amazon, obviously, because, it's a, mid-sized company, but they had like, kind of like a drop down where you could select like, I'm a, medical professional, or I'm a, like kind of your, 6 or 7 personas. And then it would kind of like tailor the experience to you. And we're actually doing that for a distributor as well, where it's based on kind of like warehouse location. So they have like, 52 regions, and like using Magento, we're basically like, okay, I'm in this, you select your area and then you kind of get your like personalized, like local pickup, faster delivery experience for that area. So I think that's coming to B2B. It's definitely going to be a little while before it's quite the Amazon level, but making small steps in that direction.
Go ahead, Isaiah. Sorry.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to segue into one thing that we like to talk about, Tim, is the success and failure. And I think that what's interesting about Kristin's situation in the market is like you're talking to a lot of companies somewhat early stages. Like they're a lot of them are exploring, right? Like they're like, should we go with Magento or should we go with, like, they don't necessarily know what they want, and then they're like, what agency should I go with? So I know you guys probably sometimes suggest agencies, and some people are probably further down and they're like, we already know they want Magento and it's like an easier sales process. But I'm curious, what's your advice to, or what are you seeing from the successful people that are like, they're doing a good job, they're buying the software, they're implementing it successfully, they're like success stories, and like a year later, like, hey, look, we got this case study from this guy that I sold. And then on the opposite side, like, what are the people doing that are just like failing and it's just kind of a disaster?
Yeah.
Because I think that, in my opinion, it's usually not the software, it's like the process. It's like they don't have the right internal people, or they don't. What are you seeing in terms of that, in terms of success and failure?
Yeah. To your first point, I wish they could all be as easy as we already know we want Magento. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. So to that point, the companies that have been successful are, as you said, it's more process. It's more, first of all, it's company culture. So it has to be, top down, that this is the change that they want. And training obviously is big in that. So when you're bringing on a digital, you have a new digital strategy and you're trying to go digital, for a business that's always done everything the old school way, it's really got to be it's got to come from the top down, and sales reps need to be trained, customers need to be coached. So I really think it's all around change management. The other thing, Magento works in a partner community, so we're not actually doing the implementations. We work with partners like Isaiah and Trellis to help us with that. And so, you know, partners like Trellis are great partners that, you know, do have a process, that have, you know, had successful case studies and working with, you know, customers that have done really well, usually have a change management process that they can really help customers, you know, train up their sales reps, train up their customers to really adapt to the new normal for their ordering process. And I think I see that across the board, that what makes a successful Magento B2B project is really comes down to what partner they select and having that change management process in place.
And do you think a lot of it is they have to be open to it too? Like if they're kind of resistant to the change management process, then it's like you're kind of pulling teeth. And
yeah, and that's also, and going back to what I was saying before, that's starting from the top down. So it's really got to be a cultural decision, and everyone's going to have to be on board, and that starts from the top.
Gotcha. What about requirements in the technical side? I mean, do you also find that that's a little bit of a challenge, like getting the details organized in terms of what they actually need?
I think with the right partner, that's really kind of off of my shoulders. We have Magento. One of the strengths of Magento is our ecosystem. So, you know, obviously, you know, when we bring the right partner in and have that conversation, they can generally coach the customer in what integrations may need to take place, and just involving the right folks from their team, you know, early really helps kind of figure all of that out.
So the partner network is solving a lot of that requirements gathering problem. So, but then it's the change management process that's a little bit that's up to the company, really. Like that's where they gotta take ownership and believe in the process. Cool. Well, that's pretty common theme that we've talked about. I think one of the first episodes we had was it's like the third episode or fourth episode. It was someone that had worked in a distributor, and like this was like maybe a while ago, and the sales rep was like, I am the website. And it was like, he was like so resistant to this guy coming in as the e-commerce manager. So it was like the classic, like kind of clashing of e-commerce and sales. And that's where like, I think the culture doesn't always work.
I mean, I think one of the funniest interactions I had with somebody recently is we were all like laughing and reminiscing about the fax machine. And he said, oh no, we still have one. Right. So it's basically, it's such a funny thing, you know, to think that that's still a critical piece or a piece of, you know, a lot of B2B businesses today, is somewhere there's a fax machine, or somehow there are e-faxes coming in. And so, you know, we have a lot of work to do still.
You would think it would be a pretty easy like sell to be like, hey, like let's get all your fax orders onto online.
You would think.
But it's still happening. So yeah, what do you and it sounds like change management is that key problem and process that would you say that's kind of the biggest challenge for B2B e-commerce, like kind of going through that change management process? And when you're talking to customers, like, is that where you're seeing the kind of the resistance, or like they're not really bought in? Or
yeah, you know, I think it is. I would say that's the biggest challenge, is just that fear of, you know, forcing their customers to purchase in another way. I will say one of the things that Magento has done to help with that is we have a digital self-service model, which enables customers to really kind of control their purchasing on their own. So permissioning buyer roles, the ability to set up their own accounts, to be able to see, you know, their corporate credit. So, you know, it's not all about just training them, but giving them the tools to really, you know, take charge of it themselves. And, you know, not every customer is going to go in and set up their own profile and do that, but having the ability to do that, you know, does help with those customers that want to set it up on their own. But yeah, I would say that change management is probably the biggest hurdle for having a successful project.
So are you literally getting people even after COVID still saying like, they're like little scared to have their customers order like they're kind of like resistant to being like, oh, I'm not sure about bringing all our customers online, or like I'm just curious, like what are the specific kind of like.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they're scared. I think the consensus I've seen is that they want to give them options, and they don't want to force a way to order. Whereas, if you're really looking to increase operational efficiencies, what may be better for your business is to really force your customers to order a different way. Now, I don't think that's going to happen overnight, obviously, but I definitely think that, should be the goal in mind if you're going to invest in a new platform is, this is our new way of doing it. And this is, and we're making it a better experience for you. So it should be something that you want to be a part of.
So they're so I guess to explain that, they're basically like worried that, okay, now you can't call up, Tim to order your supplies. You have to go online, and they're worried that like customers are kind of turned off by like being forced online, and they're worried they might even like lose sales or turn away customers because they don't get that kind of personal experience anymore.
I think there's a slight fear there, but I think overall, I think that B2B customers realize that their customers want the option to be able to order at midnight if they need to, have that 24/7 ordering support where they don't have that if they're talking to a sales rep.
You're saying Tim's not always on call 24/7 to.
I am. For the top customers, I'm there. And
Hey, I'm with you.
And one thing I think that ties in with this is that, so early career, I had mentioned, I was a retail guy long ago. But what I did in retail, though, is I was a personal shopper for a long time, right? And so what's fascinating is that, that hasn't really changed, right? The personal shopper experience, that one-on-one relationship and building up a profile and really getting into the life of the customer is really what we're trying to do now, but with different tech and tools, right? So there's this whole advent of live commerce that connects with B2C especially, but B2B is starting to use it. And where you're making an appointment, it's right. So you're making an appointment with a salesperson to be walked through a sales process for, a product or service. I really feel like that's something that is going to have a lot of life to it, especially in B2B. When you have the big clients and there are these enormous projects that they're trying to, deal with. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, what do I do? Well, I could make a live commerce appointment and we'll walk through this online together.
Yeah, and to that point, Timothy, one of the other new features that was just added to Magento was the ability for sales rep to go in and place an order on behalf of their customer and to be able to log in. Mm-hmm. So, we don't just see this as replacing your sales rep. We see this as complementary, improving the customer relationship, improving, the ability to order, but then also supplementing and helping that customer rep really do their job in the field and place orders on behalf of their customers.
Yeah, can we dig into that more? Because I think that's a big problem. Like, I think strategically, a lot of these companies, they're not really sure what to do. Let's just say, in theory, the orders kind of migrate from the phone and the fax to online, most of them. What do you think the sales reps should be doing? Like, it sounds funny, but like, I have some, of my own thoughts, but I'm kind of curious, especially someone who's been in sales most of your career, what do you think that these sales reps or these companies should be pushing their sales reps to be focusing on if they can get their orders more, online?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of my customers put a lot more focus on their largest customers. So, a B2B portal can be a great option if you have different size customers. If you're working with the Walmarts of the world and you really need to spend a lot more time with Walmart than, your mom and pop stores that are also ordering from you. So I think just repurposing where they're focusing their time, but it also is it's a way to enable them in the field with PWA, the ability to potentially place orders offline. If you're, in the middle of nowhere as a sales rep and you need to help a customer place an order, we have the ability to do that now with Progressive Web App. So yeah. I think it's just the way of looking at it. I can see where there might be fear. For some companies, they're not looking to reduce headcount. And in a lot of cases, that's not what this is intended to do at all. This is intended to supplement what you're already doing and improve the ordering process for your customers.
Yeah, I'm a big believer. You mentioned like spend more time with Walmart. I'm a big believer in kind of shifting to more of a, new business and account management. We call it account management at Trellis, but an account management mindset where, let's say once you've already got them to sign up and they're using the website, now you're like, you're their account manager and hey, you ordered these 5 things yesterday, call them up. What about these other 10 things that you didn't know about? And you're basically just helping them with ideas and thinking about things that they might not know about, or kind of using the site better and like being almost like a consultant for them as a sales rep instead of just taking their orders. That's kind of my vision of how I would see the salespeople transitioning their time, which is more valuable for the customer, right? Because then they have someone that's like an actual consultant, not just taking an order, right?
Yeah. One other thing I want to just throw out there, see what you think about, Kristin, and it's not on our suggested questions. It's totally unknown. So it's really, I'm always fascinated kind of in the arc of things, like how things develop over time. So, if you go back to 2000, it was like e-commerce early stages on the desktop, whatever. And you go to 2010, people were getting their mobile phones and we were trying to figure out how to deal with mobile commerce. 2020, people are much more sophisticated with social, and there are, bots and all these other things. What do you really see? I mean, we can't really predict, I suppose, what 2030 is going to be like, but what do you see coming up that you think is going to be a bigger deal or make a big impact in e-commerce? Is there anything that just comes to mind?
Yeah, I think I had mentioned progressive web apps previously. That's where we've invested a lot of our research in with Google. The ability to offline order, to place orders. If you do go offline, you don't lose where you are in that process, and it's a much quicker experience. It's basically, it's taking responsive a step further and having that app experience for shopping. I see that being leveraged heavily in B2B because, like I said, you have sales reps out, selling in the field, and they may not have full service, so it has catching, so it can definitely allow them to go ahead and place that order offline if they need to. So I think if I look at anything that I could see being our future, that would be it. I was actually on LinkedIn this morning and I noticed that Salesforce just acquired Mobify. I don't know if you guys had even heard, but that's their response to I guess somewhat of a CMS tool, but also somewhat of what Magento has already done with PWA. So I think that just verifies our positioning on PWA and where we see the industry going.
Yeah, I just talked to the product people, and I'm actually very impressed with their, forethought there. And we at Trellis, we actually plan to like only build Magento sites as a PWA sooner than later. We're not quite there yet, where every site's a PWA that we're building right now, obviously, but once I think they're going to be finishing up the GraphQL coverage to improve kind of like the speed of delivery of the data to the progressive web app early next year, and I think next year is going to be a big year for that, and big year for that, the beginning of people starting to like see that as kind of the normal. That's kind of what we talked about, is like right now progressive web app or headless commerce is like this like new thing where you're like, well, what is it? It's a little confusing. Like eventually we believe it's just like, that's just how you build the site. Like to your point, Kristin, in 2030, I think that's just like, we build you a new site, it's going to be a progressive web app. Like that's just how we're going to build your site. Just like what, like people ask me, is the site going to be responsive? I'm like, I can't remember the last time we didn't build a responsive site. Like that's just kind of like default for us, building a site, like table stakes, and I think that's where progressive web apps are going, and you guys are right in line with making sure that that's happening. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I want to be conscious of time. I know we got a little bit, maybe any last thoughts, or, any exciting news. I know you guys have a lot of exciting news, I feel like, at Adobe, and you guys just launched like a new version. Is there anything that you're excited about, or? Maybe you can't tell us everything because
Well, no.
you're going to get yelled at by the Adobe people for.
Exciting is a stretch, being that we're still in 2020. I know I'm ready for this year to move on from this pandemic we've all faced. You know, one of the things that Adobe has done as a company is our culture is very people driven, and they made a commitment early on not to lay off anybody, and they've actually followed through on that. So I think the fact that we haven't gone through furloughs, we're taking care of our folks, and we've still seen growth through this is all very exciting. So it's a great place to be. It's a great company to work with. I think functionality is just going to continue to progress. In regards to our latest version, some things that we've recently incorporated are things like Adobe Stock. So it's allowing our customers to incorporate rich imagery into their sites. And then also our machine learning tool, our AI machine learning tool, Adobe Sensei, is now powering product recommendations. So that's something that B2B customers can take advantage of now. So those are exciting things. I think we'll see more. And I think what's exciting for Adobe in general is that, we are constantly looking at ways to incorporate some of the Adobe solutions into the Magento platform. So I think as we go forward, you'll constantly see new functionality being added, that all it's going to do is help Magento customers drive conversion and drive growth moving forward.
So get your license now, lock in your pricing, and then you get all those new features, right? That's
Contact Kristin Gray immediately to get this offer.
Get a 3-year license, and in 2 years you're gonna have a bunch of new features. But yeah, I agree. I think that's kind of pretty exciting point where Adobe, in the beginning it was still very Magento, but now it's much more wrapped into Adobe, and I think you're starting to see like the benefits of Adobe coming into Magento. So I think that's gonna be pretty exciting for next year too. So
excellent.
Cool. All right, well, thank you so much for joining. Might have to have you back maybe in a better year when we're not, maybe when we're out of the pandemic. Let's have a reunion podcast.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much, and thank you to our listeners, and thank you to our sponsor, Punch Out To Go. Great episode 22. Take care.
Thank you.